Become a sustaining member of the Commonwealth Club for just $10 a month. Join today.
Thank you so much for inviting me to come to the Commonwealth. Did a little history lesson, got a little history lesson about the Commonwealth and what it's really done for California. Amazing that the city folks came together after the major earthquake in 1906 and decided to make their city a special place, and it is a special place. I'll just say real quick that a couple times we brought our family down, and when my sons were younger, and would go to during Christmas time, go to the Macy's ice skating rink, and then catch a game and head back up north. But here today, Brian Daly, I'm running for governor of the state of California. I want to give you a little history about myself and my family. My grandfather came to California in 1929 looking for work. It was the Great Depression, and he actually started out in Los Angeles and worked his way north and found out that in Siskiyou County, they were giving out land grants to veterans, and he was a World War I veteran. So he put his name in a pickle jar, and they drew his name out, and Norman Grant Daly got a homestead, 80-acre homestead in Siskiyou County. He paid the taxes on it, built a home, brought his family, and that was 92 years ago. So we've been in California farming for 92 years. A few years later, he bought some land in Lassen County in 1942, where I reside in Lassen County. We continue to farm the same lands there. It's the 80th year this year that we farm those lands. I'm a cereal grain farmer. We raise grain and we mill it. We're certified organic. We sell it to farmers for their seed stock. We also have part of that is a trucking business and custom farming. So give it a little more history about myself. After graduating high school, I worked. I didn't go to college, and got involved in politics by my neighbors coming to me and saying, "Hey, Brian, you should run for this Farm Service Agency board." So I did. I won that election, and then 8 months later, my county supervisor decided to retire, and I ran for the Board of Supervisors, where I served 16 years on the Lassen County Board of Supervisors. And when I left our county, it was completely debt-free, and our pensions were funded. Ran for the state assembly. People said you should be in higher office, so I ran for the state assembly in 2011, took office in 2012, served in the state assembly for 6.5 years. A special election for the Senate came, ran for the Senate, where I've served for the last 3.5 years. So why am I running for governor? I'm not wanting to leave California. There's a lot of people leaving California. I've actually had neighbors who have farmed in California for decades, who have sold their land and left California, quite frankly, because you can't afford to live in California, even when you're established. And so I've been in the legislature, and so when I actually got to the legislature, I wanted to figure out a way to actually work with the legislature. I'm a Republican. It's controlled by Democrats, and I was thinking, okay, I'm in the minority. How am I going to actually make the rest of California understand what happens in Northern California? By the way, 60% of California's water comes from my district, and it's been burning. As you recall, that last year there was the Dixie Fire, which was almost 1 million acres, all in my district. So when I became an assembly member, I reached out to all legislators, Senate and Assembly, and asked them to come to my district. If you'll come to my district, I will pay your way. And I wanted to educate them. And by the way, I have a wonderful, beautiful district. I have Lake Tahoe, I have Mount Shasta, I have beautiful rivers, very open. And by the way, if you'll invite me to your district, I'll come to your district and I'll pay my way to learn about you. So over the past 10 years, I've had 127 legislators to my district. I probably hold the record for people coming to a senator or assembly member's district. And what I did was I brought them out, we broke bread, we learned about, they brought their families in many cases, and we built a relationship. And when you build a relationship, you can actually communicate. And what I think's wrong with California and quite frankly our nation is that we have extreme right, extreme left, and there's a whole bunch of us that are in the middle that are just trying to solve some problems. And by the ability to have those conversations, looking at Mount Shasta or riding on a boat on Lake Tahoe, we were able to talk about what I needed in my district, which was forest thinning because our forest is burning down, and how to make our watersheds good. And by the way, when I went to their districts, I found out some really fascinating things as well. I went with Reggie Jones Sawyer. He represents USC, and he also represents Compton. When I went there, I got to see the space shuttle. We talked about, the college or the university. And then we went to Florence and Normandy where they had the Rodney King riots. And, his perspective of California and my perspective of California are really not that far off. He has poor people in his district. I have poor people in my district. And so when we got back to Sacramento and we're working together, we were talking about young men of color. In his district, he has blacks in his district, and I have Native Americans in my district. And the one thing we found out is that I was sharing with him the highest suicide rate for Native in California for men 18 to 25 are Native Americans. In his district, it's gang violence, it's different things, but we wanted to work together to try to figure out how we could help boys and men of color. And so we partnered together and asked the legislature for $10 million. Unfortunately, we didn't get much of that. We got about $1 million. But I'm actually part of the Boys and Men of Color's caucus because we want to work on those things. That's what California needs. California needs more of us coming together to solve some really serious issues and not so much of the partisan stuff. So that's been my goal. I'm running for governor so that we can solve issues in California. We all know we have the highest poverty rate and the highest taxes in the nation. We know that our grid infrastructure for electricity is poor. We know that we don't have water. We know that crime is running rampant. We know we have homelessness problems, and we know we have an education issue as well. Those are all things that can be fixed if people would come together and actually start talking about real solutions. So that's why I'm running for California. I'm not leaving. I am not leaving California. My goal is to bring balance to California. We've had 25 years of one-party control, and we've had 12 years of the top position in California as governor from the same party. And I think that Gavin Newsom is just out of touch. He's an elitist. He doesn't recognize what I'm hearing from my district, and that's why I decided to run and give California some balance. I look forward to the conversation with Melissa, so thanks for having me, and we'll take questions now.
Okay. Thanks so much for coming.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
I still can't believe that story about your grandfather, about the idea that they were raffling land is just so crazy. I mean, especially in San Francisco, our idea of like the value of land is it just does not compute that it would be a thing that you could win out of a pickle jar. I was looking at some newspaper archives once, and I actually saw a notice that basically said we're fixing to raffle off this land, and it blew my mind that this is an actual thing. What an incredible story. Did he just bring his immediate family, or are there lots of Dolly cousins and other folks up there?
Actually, my grandfather had, at that time, two sons, Larry and Turk were their names, and he brought them to California. And then there was 4 girls, and then my dad, who was the youngest, Gary. And so he ended up having 7 children. And they were the only Dallies that came to California, and many other Dallies in California, but part of that family. He was one of 13. My grandfather was one of 13 kids, so he was the second to the youngest, I believe. They were farmers in Idaho and that area, but he needed a job, and that's really, during the Great Depression, it was very difficult, and so he came to California. He was a machinist, but he knew how to farm, and so great opportunity. I actually have a copy of the deed that was signed by Franklin Roosevelt, which is really kind of cool. So when you talk about roots in California, when you've nurtured your land and we've developed our land, it's kind of a standing joke about we pick the rocks off. We've developed it, and so some of our ground has rocks on it. And there's my grandfather's pile of rocks. There's my dad's pile of rocks. There's my pile of rocks. There's my son's pile of rocks. As we continue to, develop that land, and so that's why we're not leaving. There's real rich history, and it's something we love. And California is an amazing place. My grandfather, I didn't get to meet him. He passed away actually before I was born, but I heard stories from my dad that he said that California was the best place in the world. Why? For a farmer, because the climate's right. We have the most fertile soils in the world. We have the ports to export our commodities out, and we have the storms that actually come from the Pacific, and the Sierras catch that water, and we have this beautiful system that God laid out. And so we're not leaving. This is a great place. We're gonna stick it out.
Well, have you guys been impacted by climate change, and has that informed maybe your approach to the environment and what can be done?
Oh, That's such a great question. Absolutely, climate change has affected the way we farm, and we've seen, a lot of changes. And Mother Nature's always dealt farmers a tough hand sometimes. We have droughts, we have floods, and we also have pests that are an issue for us. But the biggest challenge California farmers are faced with is the regulatory process from Sacramento. That's really our biggest challenge. And I want to talk about climate for a minute, because we talk about climate a lot, and Gavin Newsom just yesterday or the day before was talking about his big climate initiative. And there's a big difference between the way Gavin Newsom looks at climate change and I look at climate change. And what do I mean by that? So Gavin Newsom thinks that tailpipes are the only cause of climate change, which is actually not true. They do emit carbon, but the biggest emitter of carbon is actually forest fire. And I asked the legislature, I think you should have all the information if you're going to make good scientific data on how we're going to really curb, global emissions. And that's a key word, I think, too, is global emissions. It's global. California produces 1% of the world's emissions, but we're regulated more than any other state or country in the world. We're regulating. I asked to count carbon from forest fires in our carbon output so we could actually take care of our forest. We need to thin our forest, and that way fire can actually leave the forest alive after it burns the forest. And that bill was killed in the state Senate. They didn't want to put carbon in there because why? I don't know.
Wait, you asked for information about the carbon emissions as a result of forest fires, and that was not allowed into the bill?
So you should know that California does not count carbon from forest fires in our output of carbon, even though the largest emitter of black carbon in the world is forest fire.
Wow. Is there a different study, or has a different organization? Sometimes a university will try to make an estimate that lets you know what California's forest fires as opposed to sort of global?
Yeah, so I can tell you that the Kings Fire, which was 250,000 acres, at the time it was a giant fire, and it emitted as much carbon in that one fire, the same amount if you took every combustible engine out of California for a year. So that's trains, planes, automobiles, trucks. If you eliminate all of them, that one fire, which was 250,000 acres. So think about the Dixie Fire, which was almost 1 million acres, how much carbon we put out. So if we're going to talk about carbon, let's put all the carbon in a pile, and let's figure out how we can reduce carbon worldwide. And that's what I propose. I think that California, well, I know California can do it better. We do everything more environmentally friendly to the environment than anyone in the world, but there's a high cost to that. A very high cost. And so I propose that we manufacture the things that we need here in California and not in China or in Chile or some other country that doesn't have the same regulations we have. So when we export our jobs and manufacturing, so for example, cement is something we use to build bridges and houses, and it's produced mainly in China and shipped here and using coal-fired power plants. Why don't we get our cement? We have quarries in California. We could make cement here more environmentally friendly, put Californians to work, it's a tax base, and do it and save the global emissions. That's what we talk about. Climate change is global. It isn't just California. So that's the big difference between my philosophy about how we should attack the carbon issue and climate change versus Gavin Newsom.
What is because I've heard this issue of thinning the forests for, we've had multiple years of really horrendous forest fires, and this issue comes up repeatedly of what we need to do. Are we not doing that? And if not, why not? And does it have to do with the state versus federal lands?
Well, it has to do with several reasons. Number one, California suppressed fire, which is not natural. So about 70 to 80 years ago, California stopped fire from naturally occurring. So lightning would strike in the Sierras, and before we were ever settled California, the Native Americans were here. It would burn for months sometimes. And when it was burning, it was clearing out all the smaller brush and smaller trees and left us with these beautiful sequoias. It left us with redwoods. It left us with ponderosa pines, but it took out all the smaller stuff. And so what you had is you had meadows, and you had the ability for fire to go through with and leave the forest alive. So by suppressing fire for almost 80 years, we created an opportunity for so much brush and so much smaller trees. So we typically had 200 trees per acre. Now we have, in some places, 1,000 to 1,500 trees. So what happens is those trees are all sucking water out of the ground, right, to grow, and they need water to fight off bugs. So when there's a drought and they can't, the tree is stressed, bark beetles burrow into the tree, lay their eggs, and typically if the tree has water, the pitch pushes out the bark beetle's eggs and stops it from incubating. When they're stressed, they can't, and they die. Then you get lightning strike or man cause, and you see these catastrophic infernos, which we have now. So we need to go in, thin our forest, open it back up mechanically, and then fire can come through and do what it's supposed to do and leave our forest actually sequestering carbon. So a live forest sequesters carbon, a dying forest emits carbon.
Interesting. So smaller fires to avoid the
Less
effects of the
intense, less intense
fire.
because the canopy, we call it, the trees. So what happens when you get too many trees? Their limbs are touching each other and the fire burns from tree to tree. When they're spread out, like they were when they naturally, the fire burns through and doesn't burn the tree. It burns through the bottom of the forest and leaves you a beautiful forest where the critters can get away, and we actually have water, clean water that comes out of our forest.
And have you been able to do that in your district?
We have, excuse me, we've done some, not like we should. We need to do it more aggressive. And I actually ran a lot of legislation. That was one of the places I actually focused on, was to thin the forest. And we've done some legislation. We have a partner that's not very good, which is the federal government, which has 60% of our forest as well.
Now, I do want to, and I'm sorry to sort of jerk to a different subject, but I do want to acknowledge we are here in the Bay Area where, folks know Gavin Newsom and, have known him for a long time. Whatever they think of him, they're familiar with him. And so, but they also watch the news and they see, you're a Republican and there are things happening with your party outside of California. And so I just want to ask you some questions to sort of introduce yourself and on some hot button issues for folks who aren't familiar with you. So, do you believe that Joe Biden won the presidential election in 2020?
Joe Biden's our president, and I believe he won.
And are you?
Now, I want to follow up on that, though, a little
Please.
bit, if I may. Do I think the question really is there election fraud? And I think that we should talk about elections a little bit. Just in the recall election, there was a guy found in Los Angeles that had methamphetamines, assault rifle, and 300 ballots. So what are we going to do this election? We are going to be watching and making sure that we have people watching all the polls and all the places so that we can make sure that we don't have some ability for somebody to game the system.
Well, sure. And I don't think people object to that. I think if when you're talking about putting people in the observer position who cannot be assuaged, right? Who under no circumstances are they going to think this is legit, right? They're sort of there to come up with a reason. It seems like some people, and I don't think all election observers are like this. I think many are very well-intentioned and upstanding people, but it seems like the fear is that you get an observer who's got an agenda, who's just never going to be satisfied. And that there is election fraud. I mean, any system is going to have fraud, and the question is it enough to overturn, an election? Which we've had some really cool squeakers here in California in certain offices, and it's really sort of come down to things. Does the mail ballot voting that we do here in California, do you think that helps a candidate like you, or not, or does it sort of wash it?
I've been mailing my ballot in for years because I live in my district or my county a long ways from the election office. So I've been absentee. I do it by absentee. I mail it in. So more that what I'm concerned about is actually the turnout. If there's anything that's more, I think, damaging to our democracy is that people just aren't voting. We've done all these things to try to get more people to engage, and less people are engaging. And I think that's unfortunate. I think that, Californians and Americans need to understand that, your vote does matter. And what matters is what the outcomes of that. I mean, we have, in California, we have 77% of Californian children can't read. You want to talk about a
Wait,
threat?
what?
Yeah, 77% can't read at grade level.
Okay.
So when you talk about a democracy and you talk about a republic going forward, I mean, we have to have good schools. And we have to have a place where people feel safe. Those, I think, are more of a threat than our election policies and those. I think people need to realize that you need to vote because elections matter. And I wouldn't be running if I didn't think I could win and I didn't think the system was going to treat me fair.
Excellent. And are you a Trump supporter? Do you consider yourself MAGA Nation? I don't even know how to.
I get
how best to
I get
say
asked that question a lot. Look, I'm really focused on California and what California needs, and Washington D.C. is its own political animal, and what happens there is fascinating to me to watch. But we're very polarized. Obviously, when he ran against Hillary, I voted for him. People ask about from that on. Right now, I'm focused on what's happening in California. The history for the Dallies to stay in California is on the line this election. And it has nothing to do with what Joe Biden and Trump or DeSantis or anybody does. It has to do with Gavin Newsom and myself. And I want to give Californians an opportunity to have balance. I mean, I can't think of a place. Well, I asked this question to many reporters. Tell me one thing, just one thing in the last 4 years that Gavin Newsom has solved that we have as a problem. One.
Well, I mean, it is a system, right?
One.
I'm
one man
asking
can't, for one, Melissa.
Can't
and you're not giving me one. Because there isn't one. And I'm not going to, I know you're interviewing me, but I throw that back because I'm out on the campaign trail. And we've had more money in California. In the 10 years I've been in the legislature, there has been more money than there's, quite frankly, ever been. $101 billion surplus this year. Now, it's always usually about money. We fix problems when we have money. Well, California has money, and the problems are pretty high. I mean, let's just name off the problems that we have in California. We have a drought, and we have no water. Is that true, though? Is that really true? Let's think about that. In 2018, this is a fact, was the wettest year in the recorded history of California. 2018, that was 4 years ago. Remember the Oroville Dam spillway broke.
Oh, right. I remember.
Now, Gavin Newsom just said yesterday, we're in a 7-year drought. No, Gavin, I'm sorry. The wettest year was 4 years ago, and we were not in a drought. Even though we were still under drought regulations somehow. His administration still said we were in a drought, even though we had the wettest year in recorded history. Oroville Dam breaks. So that water is stored. Our reservoirs, I represent Shasta, Oroville, and Folsom, 105% of full. Now here we are, really 3 years later, because in 2018 they stayed full. And 3 years later, we don't have water. 220,000 acres of rice in California didn't get planted because we don't have water. Why? Because our reservoirs were designed to hold water and give us 5 years of drought relief. We don't have water. So I'm going to say, I'm calling BS. How's that? Because they let the water out. The federal government and the Newsom administration has let the water out.
To go to where?
To the ocean.
Wait, they released the water they have created a drought or created a water shortage. Do you think they did it for political purposes?
Hey, look, I've been watching this for some time. I'm a farmer. My district, remember, 60% of the water comes from my district. I watch water a lot, and I know where it comes from. And so I just want to throw that out to Californians. Don't buy this fact that we are in a drought. The rain has not come. But California was designed for, it floods. We've had floods and we've had droughts. And the system, actually, Pat Brown was the last one to build any infrastructure. In 2014, we passed a bond to build Sites Reservoir, which is up north. It's 1.2 million acres. Money's there. Not one gallon of water has been stored. In fact, since 1999, Californians have passed bonds, $27 billion worth of water and parks bonds, and we haven't gotten 1 gallon of extra water.
So to be clear, you are alleging that the Newsom administration or people affiliated with it have been releasing water on purpose and sending the water to non-useful places like the ocean or some
Well,
place?
I'm going to say they'll tell you we're doing it for the environment and we're doing it for this and that, but I think we can do a lot better job of managing our water, because the system was set up for 5 years worth of water, and we don't have that water that was there.
Well, I think as a consumer, I think one thing that bothers, sort of regular folks, regular Californians, is continually being told, to cut back on water usage when it's obvious in every study that the water is not being used. It's not about, my shower, right? It's about golf courses and other kinds of, usage that aren't related to sort of individual residential usage, and yet we constantly get these messages, and you go, this is such a, to mix metaphors here, drop in the bucket when it comes to the overall drought. So just in terms of handling a water shortage caused by whatever reason, is that something your administration would look closer at, like trying to figure out where who's actually using it by and large, and valuing that issue over?
So great question. Yes, absolutely. So look, I live in reality. And what is reality? I'm a farmer. You don't just simply throw seed on the ground and get a crop. You must till the land. You must fight off those pests. You must water it. You have to do all those things before you harvest. And in California, we just throw money at everything and we get no results. So my administration will push every day to build that reservoir. So when we do see what we see in climate change, a lot of water, no water, we'll be able to capture that water, and Californians won't have to be in this crisis mode. We are in constant state of crisis. And I asked, Gavin Newsom and his administration, why are we like that? It almost is great for politics. I guess if you want to try to fix crisis and throw money at it and get no results, but not in California. We throw money at it and we get no results. And the electorate needs to understand that there are options to fix these. Let's build reservoirs so we don't have to be in a constant state of crisis. Let's thin our forests so we don't have to have these mega fires. Let's actually build a transmission line from point A to point B and drive the cost of energy down. Let's drill for oil in California, more environmentally friendly than importing it from Ecuador on a ship, polluting, bring it to California. We're going to consume those things. We're the 5th largest economy in the world. If we're going to consume them, let's manufacture them here.
Well, we are in San Francisco. What about homelessness? I know that's a big issue for us. I don't know if it's an issue necessarily in your district, but it's obviously a big deal. So can you talk about what your thoughts are on that?
So homelessness is very complicated, number one, and I want to just touch on a few of the things that really, I think the number one thing for homelessness is addiction. And the second thing is then mental illness, and the third is housing. And there's a fourth one that I like to put in there, which is 30,000 criminals have been let out of prison by Gavin Newsom, and I think they're on our streets as well. So let's talk about the first one, addiction, something I know a lot about actually. My dad was an alcoholic, and from the time I can remember until 7th grade, my dad was passed out on the couch every night. And my mom actually separated from my dad and learned about alcoholism and addiction. She actually went to Pasadena. This was the time when Betty Ford came out and said, alcoholism's real and it's an addiction, it's a disease. And my mom got educated. And so she came back to the ranch and said to my dad, if you'll go through treatment, no matter what, I'll come home and give it a go. So he did. He went to Pasadena and he went through a 30-day course and never drank another drop till he passed away. 30 years. And it changed my life because my dad was a dad now, and he was a father and a husband and the things that he needed to be to make his family whole. So when we talk about addiction, we can't continue to just let drugs freely be on our streets and expect people to ever get off of drugs. And the other thing is that I fault this to the Newsom administration. He has a top-down bureaucracy, and he's not stopping. You can be high when you come into the shelters, and people don't go to the shelters because they're not safe. Because if you have somebody who is on methamphetamines and is in the shelter, you're going to go out and actually have interviewed people on the street who say, I'm not going to go in there because I'm safer to be underneath the bridge somewhere where I'm not going to get attacked. So We need to have them clean and sober. We need to help them get off of the addictions. We need to stop illegal drugs from coming in. 99% of them have addiction issues. Mental health. Let's talk about mental health. Mental health is going to be supplied by, I was a county supervisor for 16 years. The counties and the cities are the ones that are going to give the services. It's not the state bureaucracy that's going to give it to them. And Gavin Newsom, quite frankly, has set up a whole bureaucracy in Sacramento, spending a lot of money and not getting it to the local level. I want to empower the local cities and counties by giving them the money and helping them get the clinicians they need for mental health. I want to also, I think we should work with faith-based communities. They've actually, many places, I've toured them where they partner with the shelters and actually get people clean and sober and on a pathway to turning the corner in their life.
How do you deal with people, because this is what we run into frequently here, is how do you deal with people who either are mentally ill and don't wish to receive treatment, or are addicted and don't wish to go to a recovery program? I think that's part of the issue, is not just having the infrastructure, but finding a way to get people into it, because not everyone wants that kind of treatment.
Yeah, so I did vote for the Care Court program that's through, but I want to make sure that Californians know that we have to empower the locals. Every single city or county has a different situation than it is everywhere else. It's rampant in California. There's no doubt that we have crime. The third thing I didn't mention was housing, and housing is. I was just reading an article yesterday that in Texas, it's the median home price is $220,000. In California, it's $660,000. Why is that? Everything costs more in California. It's because we have a regulatory system that's in place, and then again, our energy rates are higher, our diesel's higher, our manufacturing's higher, so that drives up the cost of all the things you need to build a home. But we can surely do exemptions for baseball stadiums and basketball stadiums, and the power brokers that know how to do that can get waivers. We did one for Berkeley. Remember, the students at Berkeley didn't have housing, and it was all hung up in court, and the legislature took action, and we're going to build houses for students because it politically got to the place where we got to do something. Well, why don't we do that for residential housing? We can. There's just has to be the political will and somebody pushing to have that happen. So we need to do that, and we need to drive down the cost for inflation in California. Everybody that's suffering in California, the fastest way to drive down inflation, the cost of an egg, the cost of a 2x4, is to drive down the cost of energy. We actually own a trucking company. We move our products. And in the last 8 months, it's $200 a day per truck, just for diesel. So that's $1,000 a week. That's $4,000 a month. So everything we move, right? I say we're the first part of cheese, because a lot of our stuff goes to dairies, right? We move our products, dairies use it, and then they make cheese, milk, butter, all those things that Californians love. But at $200 a day, think about all that transportation. That's driving up. Eggs went up 36% last year. They're not going to come down until we drive down the cost of energy, and that means diesel, gas, electricity in California.
Actually, so to get back to one of the things you had just said, I mean, my understanding from covering politics in Sacramento is that, whenever you try to reduce the number of regulations and the amount of local control over zoning and, restrictions on where you can build and how high you can build, et cetera, it's, people are scared of the homeowners, of the other folks in the neighborhood. There's no sort of angrier group of voters than people who feel like they're losing control over what can get built around them. And so politically, I mean, are you concerned that you would alienate that group of very, very motivated voters by saying we need to make this easier?
I came out of local government where the joke is when you come out of local government and go to the Capitol, you're happy to never see another subdivision map, right? Because that's exactly what you're talking about. But I know for a fact there are many huge developments in California that have been that the neighbors are okay with it, but the legal processes with somebody be able to hold them up on CEQA, and trial attorneys, quite frankly, gaming the system to make money and leverage, and pretty soon it drives the cost up to where you can't have these have it happen in California. So we need some tort reform. We need to be able to say, look, if you're going to sue, and it's a frivolous lawsuit, that you have to pay. And that's something I would work towards in California. I know all those trial attorneys out there are going to be blasting me for that. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of frivolous lawsuits. There's a lot of regulatory things we can streamline. We can do it for a stadium, again, and we can do it for the kids at Berkeley, but we should be able to do it in other places where there's actually buy-in. And the example goes to all infrastructure, whether it's roads, housing, building reservoirs. I mean, we're hung up in court a lot. We have to decide in California that are we going to really make sure Californians are whole and have the ability to live here and stay here? I mean, Reagan, my son, who is with me here today, his generation doesn't think they're going to own a home in California. I never even thought that was something I knew I was going to be able to do when I started my life out. I knew I was going to own a home someday in California, and I do. So we have to give that dream back to our children. We have to drive that cost down and give Californians some hope that this state is going to be a place where it's welcoming and you can build a life here.
What about the labor shortage? Because I've interviewed some folks who are in the planning, at least locally in the Bay Area, in the sort of planning area, and they say, look, we've permitted things, there are things that are ready to go, but we don't have the people to build the things. We don't have the carpenters. We don't have the electricians. And for a while there, it seemed like there was also a materials issue, but I think that's not so much the case anymore. But they say we've got such a shortage of skilled laborers that also drives up the cost and the time it takes to build.
Well, that's a broad question because it impacts a lot of different things. One is we need skilled and trained workforce in our schools. We don't have career education, career technical education in our schools much anymore. So we need that, which brings people into a trade. The other thing is, I'm just going to share with you, the Bay Area is expensive to live in. And so most of those laborers, and I actually worked construction. I was part of the operating engineers. I built reservoirs and I built hydroelectric plants when I was younger. So I was a operating engineer. I was in a union.
Wow. What did you do?
I actually had a blasting, I drilled and blasted. So with dynamite, I did quarries and I ran bulldozers and that kind of stuff.
That sounds fun.
I have a crazy upbringing. So yeah, I worked in the unions, and so I'm really close with those folks. I mean, they're great, hardworking people. They get a good hourly wage, and they have a career. It's a great career, and they're very skilled at what they do. Mm-hmm. And like you said, they're hard to come by. But I gotta share with you, the Bay Area is expensive to live here, and it's expensive to get to work. So if you're commuting in or out to the Bay Area. So I know a lot of them there, and expensive to live in California. I know a lot of them that are moving to other states where it's less expensive to live. Their money goes a lot further, and they're getting paid the same amount. So why would you stay in California? So we're exporting a lot of our workforce because they can't afford to live here. And that's one of my goals as governor, is to drive down the cost. Everything Gavin Newsom does drives up the cost. Electricity is going to continue to go up. Gasoline is going to continue to go up. Diesel is going to continue to go up. And the hourly wage earner and the person that's on a fixed income is getting destroyed by those policies. And the poor are staying poor, and the rich are getting richer in California. And we have to balance that out so we have a middle class and people can afford to live in California. That's what I'm going to focus on 24/7. There's all these other things. There's 4 things the government should do. Public safety, number 1. Allow people to have a roof over their head and give the services that you need, transportation, water, infrastructure. And the 4th one is education. That's really what government's supposed to do. Those are the things I'm going to focus on. There's a lot of things that Gavin Newsom talks about. Those are the things I want Californians to know. I will work every day to drive the cost down so you can stay in California, you can have a roof over your head, your kids can have a good education. The road you drive on is not the highest tax gasoline and the worst potholes in the world. We're 45th in the nation, and we pay double per mile for our roads.
Don't get me started. As a San Franciscan, like the amount of construction that's going on our roads constantly that never ever seems to result in better roads is just so amazing. You just go, wait, I thought they just fixed this. No, it's a big frustration, of course, here in the Bay Area. But you're also pro school choice. I mean, I think
absolutely
that's part of your platform is to make sure to introduce sort of competition to the system to give people better opportunities. You want to talk more about that?
Yeah, I'd love to. My sons went to public school. Both of them got accepted to Cal Poly San Luis, so they got educated well. Maybe they got a lot of smarts from their mom, I think, and that might be the most part of it. But we had a good experience. I went to public school, but my daughter is not going to public school. We have chose to put her in a private school, and because we want to get an education. There's so much going on in schools with, gender stuff. There's all these other things besides reading, writing, and arithmetic, and that's really what we want to focus on for that. And so for me, I want to empower parents. Parents always make the right decision for their children. We spend $21,000 a year on education per student. So 25 kids in a class, that's $500,000. It's a lot of money. And 50,000 children didn't show up for LA Unified School District this year. And 27,000 didn't come last year. So we are failing through our system. And it's crazy. We put money into education and we don't hold anybody accountable. If any other business in the world, if you put that much into it and you failed, you would stop doing it. And apparently in California, it's okay to fail and just keep throwing money at it. So I want to hold the teachers accountable that are good, and the ones that are bad, we need to let them go. Figure out a way to let them go. And that's really easy to say, but I know it's hard to do.
The CTA is so powerful. Do you honestly think that even, let's assume you win and you're the governor, but you still got a Democratic legislature?
Yes.
And veto proof, at least, maybe barely, but, at least today, like a veto proof legislature. How do you get something like that, which is going to anger one of their biggest sources of funding, the CTA? How would you get something like that through?
Well, I'll just say this first. Gavin Newsom is owned by the California Teachers Association. I mean, they own him. They will not own me. They're not going to have, obviously that. I sat on the education committee. We had like 300 bills. Seriously, 300 bills that came through education, and I voted for a lot of things, funding for school early preschool funding. We funded a lot. We put a lot of money in it, and so. But at the end of the day, parents need choice. We need the money to be able to follow the kids, and when you have competition, you're going to get a lot better result. And so I will work every day to make sure that we work against the legislature, and I will have that veto pen. I'll have the ability to say, you know what, this is out of line. We must get our kids. 77% of kids aren't reading at grade level in California.
Is that like is that the test they take at 8th grade, or like where's that?
Yeah, I think it is at 8th grade actually. But the other thing too is that, we know that inner cities and rural education, that's where we have a lot in common actually. I have a lot in common with that because we have, lots of issues out there. But we can do better. We can do a lot better. And we need to be able to say, no, you're going to actually educate, or you're not going to be able to continue on down this path. And when you have choice, parents will make the right choice. If you give the opportunity for a parent to take and guide that money to a school, they will do that. And we saw that with charters, and there's been a lot of legislation that came through for charters to actually slow them down. You're not having choices anymore because the legislature is so owned by the CTA. So I will work every day to make sure that parents have choice. And that's really what we need. If you give parents choice, you'll get better results.
Now, other members of your party in other places have endorsed things like banning of certain books in schools and banning certain kinds of conversations or curriculum. Is that the kind of thing you've endorsed, or is your stance just sort of more local control? Or where are you aligned with any of those kind of policies?
I personally have noticed in the last couple years or so, I actually parents are more engaged. We're seeing school boards turned over. We've seen it right here in this town, right? So parents, I always believe in parents, and I like local control. I come from local government. I want to empower the school board. Look, if those are parents on there and they're engaged, they're going to do the right thing for their kids. They'll choose the right curriculum if they have the opportunity, and we're seeing that in California. We're seeing that a lot. I did a bill. This is a sex education bill. So I asked for transparency. And what do I mean by that? Just the curriculum that's going to be taught would be posted online, especially during COVID, because we weren't able to see people weren't able to come in, and I got it out of committee the first year, and it died in appropriations. The California Teachers Association.
Wait, the bill did just give the
Just
information?
I wasn't changing the curriculum. All I was asking is to put up the curriculum that they're going to teach online so that parents could just look at the curriculum, because it's a hotbed issue.
Yeah.
It really is. And I thought that parents could just see, right? And it wasn't opt-in, opt-out. It was just posted online. And I couldn't get that. Tried it 2 years in a row, couldn't get that bill done.
That is amazing. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. That's actually typical, but but that is really, really.
And the reason being is that when I saw some of the curriculum, actually in Rockland, which is part of my district, the moms came to me and said, this is actually what they're teaching. And I was like, they can't be teaching that. And then when I saw the curriculum, I stayed up one night in Sacramento till 3 o'clock in the morning looking at all the curriculum. And it was, if I was to teach that class in the Capitol, I would have sexual harassment charges probably against me.
Wow.
And I sat on the Me Too. I was on the committee for Me Too to make the Capitol a safer place. I was on that committee, and I went through all the Me Too movement stuff in the Capitol. I was part of
remember
that.
that.
And so I just want transparency. I think parents, if you have the right information, will always make the right choice.
And so we've got some questions online from folks watching. So it says here, how do you get rid of drugs? Through police or decriminalization?
Well, we need to we have to stop drugs from coming across our border. Number one, that's the biggest avenue for drugs, is coming through on the border. And yeah, we need to criminalize people who are selling and trafficking huge amounts of drugs. We need to make sure and put some criminalization in that. You know, Proposition 47 and 57 decriminalized drugs, and it was sold to the people as, it was, what was 47? The Safe Schools and Neighborhoods Act. But in that piece of legislation, which Gavin Newsom was the only statewide officer that endorsed Proposition 47, you can rape an unconscious woman, and it's not considered a violent crime. You can sex traffic a woman, and it's not considered a violent crime. That's what Gavin Newsom stands for. I can't think of anything more violent. And also in that was decriminalizing drugs, basically making it easier and letting people out of prison who had drug offenses. And so I want to just make sure that people understand where I'm at. If you were in prison for marijuana, I think you should be let out for sure. But if you're in prison for having pounds and you're making a living off of fentanyl and you're killing our kids in our street, no, you need to be incarcerated, and that can't be legal in California, because it's, in fact, more people died in San Francisco from fentanyl than COVID. It is a crisis, and we don't talk about it. We don't talk about how many deaths we have because of fentanyl. So if your business is to sell drugs and push drugs, then we should make that a crime. If you're addicted and hooked on drugs, we need to help you get off of those drugs and get you on your path.
So you're not a fan of what some people call harm reduction strategies, which is where you provide like a safe space for people to use drugs. I know we've had that debate here in San Francisco, and we've had, I know Vancouver, some other cities have tried to have places where people can
I voted
make
against the
intravenous-
safe injection bill, and then I just put it very simple. My mom didn't put my dad in the bedroom and bring him alcohol and say, this is a safe place for you to waste your life away and keep using it. No, she made him make a decision and change his life. I wouldn't put my son in a place and say, I know you're going to die eventually, but I'm going to continue to give you drugs. That's not helping people. Helping people is actually getting them off their addiction and stop people who are using it as a business. We need to criminalize that, and we need to get those people off the street. You have to have punishment for crime, or you're going to have a lot of crime, which is what we have. I mean, Gavin Newsom let out 30,000 inmates during COVID, and they're running our streets. They're smash and grab. There's all this stuff that's happening.
There was a recent poll or study, I can't remember exactly where the numbers came from, but it was really startling. It was something like 50% or 60% of San Franciscans had been the victim of crime. I think it was 50% had been a victim, and then another 20% knew someone who had been a victim of crime, which is just, really amazing.
Can I touch on crime for just
Sure.
one more thing? When I'm governor, I will appoint a parole board that makes people serve their sentences, especially repeat offenders. So, for example, you remember there were 6 people that died on K Street in Sacramento. Smiley Martin was the gentleman that shot. There was 100 rounds, 6 people died. Gavin Newsom, under a state of emergency, was in Puerto Rico taking a vacation. My son Reagan works in one of those buildings right there. There's a bullet hole in the wall on K Street where he works. From that, shoot him up. I mean, we can't let criminals who are violent criminals like that out of prison. We have to keep them in for their sentences. And that's something I will do for Californians. You have to have punishment for crime or you're going to have a lot of crime, and that's what we have. Violent criminals need to be put back in prison.
All right. We have another question here. Somebody asks, what can you do for seniors on a fixed income who are suffering? I think that kind of goes back to your conversation about energy prices, but what else can be done specifically for seniors who are really struggling with inflation and all sorts of issues?
Well, I will say this to seniors. One of your biggest costs are your medications and your health care. And, Gavin Newsom did a no-bid contract with Kaiser. He chose Kaiser, who is his biggest donor. I will make competition in health care so you will drive the price down. Competition always drives the price down to help you get your health care and your prescriptions cheaper. The biggest thing for all of Californians who are facing inflation, doesn't matter if you're just a senior, is all the things that drive up the cost in California. All of our environmental issues that Gavin Newsom talks about are all going to drive up our cost. And so if we can drive down energy cost, that's the number one, energy cost. And I don't want to talk about energy for a second because I'm not talking about doing with less green. I'm talking about, we have wind and solar are his 2 big things. And he's talking about battery storage, which is not really here yet. We don't have battery storage like we need it. But we do have geothermal, which is something that works when the wind's not blowing and the sun's not shining, and it's green. We have the ability to use, the forest.
I'm sorry, what do you mean by geothermal?
Geothermal is hot water in the ground, right? You drill in the ground, you pump the water out, it makes electricity, you put the water right back in the ground.
Oh, okay, I see.
So it's not an impact to the environment. It basically, you use that heat for energy, and it works at night and when the wind's not blowing. So why do we have flex alerts from 4 to 9? It's because the sun's not shining. We have plenty of solar. In fact, Californians pay about $1 billion in rates to send energy to Arizona and Nevada because we overproduce when the sun is shining.
And we don't have the battery storage to keep it.
And we also don't have transmission to be able to move it from one place to the other. So just simply by building transmission lines from places like Bakersfield, where we have a lot of solar, in fact, they're the biggest county that has solar, to places like Los Angeles, you can reduce that cost.
I do also want to talk a bit. We got a few minutes left, and I wanted to ask you about your strategy here. I was looking at the election results, and I saw that Governor Newsom got the most votes even in places like Fresno, San Bernardino, Inyo, I think, and places where you might hope for a better showing for Republicans. Like, what is your plan for winning people over in places like that enough to win an election?
Well, Melissa, that's a great question, and obviously we know this is a blue state. But I will tell you, out on the campaign trail, there's a lot of independents and Democrats who have been. I met a guy just last week who was like, "I'm blue to the core," and he said, "But I'm done." He's like, I can't afford to live in California. All the things we've talked about. He's like, and I'm going to vote for you. He's like, I'm going to vote for you. So. What's the strategy? The strategy is obviously get my name out there, let people know that I'm a common sense, rational person. I'm not some national icon. I'm not a movie star that's ran before. I'm not somebody that has a public radio show. I'm a guy that's been working in the trenches for 10 years. And I want to give Californians the option that, hey, California can be a better place. Look, Gavin Newsom has the bully pulpit. He has a lot that is hard to compete with. So I just ask Californians, if you're looking for something different and you want to, if you know what you're going to get in 4 years, I guarantee you, well, first of all, he's going to be running for president. So he's going to do what he did here in San Francisco. He's going to leave San Francisco a mess, go to Sacramento. He's going to leave California a mess to try to go to president. We have problems we need fixed. I want to fix those problems. I'm not leaving California. That's really my strategy. As much money as I need people to donate to my campaign, they can go to briandalley.com. They can donate. I need them to share all my social media posts and let people know who I am. And then turn out to vote.
Has the Republican Party in California or nationally been supportive of you? I know nationally they don't always get into what's going on in California, but has the California Republican Party been
Yeah, I
supportive?
won the nomination in the primary from the party. I won that, and so not financially, not so much. I mean, the California Republican Party is, it's tough for us to raise money in California, and money equates to getting your message out, and so I struggle. It's hard for people because they don't think we can win, but I believe we can win. I think we will have a change in California at some point. I don't know what it takes to make that person who says, man, I'm just really blue and I just really, and we get drowned out by all this national politics, but if you look at what's happening in California, we need balance, and we need somebody that cares about California and that isn't running for something else. I'm not running for anything but governor of California. I want to stay in California. I want the Dallies to be able to farm. I want your family to be able to stay. That's what this is about.
Well, we don't have that much time, but we're on the internet, so we can go over a little if we care, if we want. Adam's like, I have a question here from the audience, but before I get to it, I do, because this is like an international issue. But before I get to it, I do want to, because I threatened this before we sat down here today. I do want you to tell me about your wife, because this is a really, really fascinating part of your life that I think people out there should know about you.
Well, I should have said that in my introduction about my wife. So first, you should know that my wife, Megan, we've been married 23 years. We met when I was on the campaign trail running for supervisor, actually, and she's 10 years younger. Amazing woman. We ended up dating for like 3 or 4 years. I actually proposed to her at the County Board of Supervisors as the chairman, got down on one knee and asked her to marry me, and I told the clerk, if she says yes, record it. If she says no, don't record it. So we've been married 23 years. We have our
So
oldest
romantic.
Our oldest son is Chase. He is up running our business, totally running our farm right now. And then Reagan, who's my middle son, who is on the campaign trail, he's taken some time off from college to stick with me on the campaign. And then we have Roslyn, who was a total surprise. She's 10 years younger than the boys, and she's 12, and she goes to school in Sacramento. So when I ran for the Senate, we did so much work with all these legislators coming to our home. Megan knew a lot of them, and our goal was to, represent our district, and also represent California. So we're like, who's going to replace me in the assembly? And I said, Meg, you should do it. And she's like, oh, I know that place is kind of rough down there. But I said, who's going to champion? Who knows who's built those relationships? So she's in the assembly. So she ran for the assembly, won the assembly in a special election. So we both serve in the legislature. We rent a place in Sacramento. And the unique thing is, we don't vote a lot, actually. Surprisingly, we don't vote the same. And the first year it was maybe 2 or 3, and people, interview us and like, how's that working? And so last year it was a lot more. And so we both sat on education committee, and she's the vice chair of education in the assembly, and I'm just on the committee. And so, and we vote different. And so she's like, you just don't understand what's going on. And I'm like, well, this
These intense car rides back on the weekends.
But that's what California needs. I mean, at the end of the day, even my wife and I don't agree. And I don't agree with a lot of my legislators, but there's a lot of things we agree on. Let's set those things we don't agree on to the side, just like we do in our marriages, and let's make California a better place. That's what this race is about. Just like Megan and I do, we don't agree on everything, but we agree on how we should raise our children, and we agree on that we want a better place in California. And so why can't Democrats and Republicans sit down and set those things in the parking lot that we don't agree on, and let the national things play out the way the national things are going to play out. And let's focus on getting some things done in California. We know there's some issues that we can fix.
I hope there's like a Hollywood screenwriter out there listening. I think that's got all the elements of like a great, like a Parks and Rec kind of show or something.
I could only imagine what she'll say.
Okay, and I do have to ask this because somebody asked it, and I want to make sure we get everybody's questions in.
Okay.
And so this is, what are your thoughts on military aid to Ukraine?
I've been watching this whole situation, and I think we need to help these people out some. I don't know what that looks like, obviously, budget-wise and what we have resources available. I don't want us to put our people in there, but if we can, this is a touchy issue. I just don't like dictatorships. I really don't like the fact that people put, they're just bullies, and it's wrong. And so, but more importantly, you want to be a bigger factor in it. Let's produce the things that California and America needs right here. Fertilizer is something that farmers use. It comes from Ukraine, and it comes from Russia and China. Let's produce it here, and that gives us the power. We're buying oil from countries that aren't good to their people, and we're using it here. Why don't we produce it here? And we can do it more environmentally friendly. That, to me, makes us a bigger player in that, because we're funding Russia's abuse on Ukraine.
I don't pretend to know much about the specifics of farming in California, but I do remember hearing about some of the issues that are happening with the Ukrainian wheat harvest and grain harvest, and being grateful that we live in California, where there is actually this crop being grown here. It's not necessarily going to stay here all the time. It has places to go, but in a pinch, we could call on those resources, because they're things that we actually have here, so we don't have to stare down sort of catastrophic food shortages, like certain places that do rely heavily on that on the Ukrainian agriculture. I think we're lucky to have the farmers that we have here. If we needed to somehow nationalize or sort of, or you know what I mean, like if it was if this was like a starvation event, like we at least have an agricultural base here to
well, I will just, as a farmer in California in a long time, I'm going to tell you that we are not, I mean, we produce a lot of commodities, and we're blessed beyond your wildest dreams. But I will tell you, we are on the verge. If we do not solve some of the issues that we have for California farmers, and that is the cost, that is the water, you're going to see, you could see food shortage of certain types of food in California as well. I mean, rice. I want to talk about rice for a minute. And I mentioned it earlier. 220,000 acres. That's 300 square miles of rice that didn't get planted in California. So about 400 and some change thousand acres get planted. So we only have 100 and some thousand acres. So you think about rice, $10 a 100 pounds to the farmer normally, it's $37 a 100 pounds right now. So I think we should focus on California, making sure that we have sustainability, safe food. This is one thing we do, is we produce it safe. And we can then we can export. Obviously we're going to export, but California is closer than most would understand to having some serious problems if we don't solve our water issues.
Well, thanks for raining on that bit of hope that I had. But no, that's important. And the fertilizer, I've read that the fertilizer issue is very serious. The cost of getting it for farmers is
fertilizer is made from natural gas, mm-hmm. and we have all kinds of natural gas in California. We don't make any fertilizer here.
Why not? You should open
because
fertilizer.
Because it's a lot easier to do it in a country where they don't have the environmental regulations who are ruining their global climate change and shipping it here. That's my point about how we should do it in California. We need to produce those things here safer, and we need to incentivize those companies to stay here.
We have time for a last question. So I do want to ask you what it is. It's a strange time, it seems like, in history. It does feel like you said earlier, like we were just sort of in a constant state of crisis. It seems like it constantly goes like sort of drought and fire and then mudslides and then, and it's just this constant problem, especially, sort of coming out of COVID. So let us end on a happy note. Tell me what gives you hope for the future of California.
Well, as I travel the state, first, there's a lot of people who are just like me who don't want to leave and that are willing to fight for what the California dream is. And, I believe in people. I believe that when people are faced with when they're educated and they really understand what's going on, they'll make the right decision. It's just like I say about parents. If you give them the opportunity, they'll make the right decision for their family every time. And I believe that Californians just have been caught up in a lot of drama when it comes to reality. And I live in reality. I live in reality in Sacramento. And I believe that Californians are going to change. I know they'll change because we cannot continue to go down this path. At some point when you're on that fixed income or you can't fill up your gas tank, you wonder why they can do it in Nevada. And they can, Hawaii's got cheaper gas than we do. And they don't have an oil well in their whole state. They have to ship everything there. So when people start using common sense and understanding, I believe California change. And California is still going to lead this world. I believe in California. I believe in what my grandfather said. I know it's here. We just have to get people moving in the right track and work together. At the end of the day, stop all this noise and get down to what's really happening in California. That's what I'm about. I'm a common sense, hardworking farmer that wants to make my community a better place. And my community right now happens to be California. I will work across the aisle. I've been in the minority. I know how to do that. And I just ask people, are you going to be better off 4 years from now? If you like what you've been getting and it's great, then by all means stick with it. But if you think there's a better future and there's another different opportunity, hey, give me a try. And I will work as hard for you as I do my own family and my constituents. Nobody can outwork me. I will work hard, and I believe in California, and I believe in making this. I want people that are born into poverty to not have to stay there, and we see that in California. That's what this is about.
It's the land of hope. California. Always. Alrighty. Our many thanks to State Senator Brian Dahle for joining us here today. We want to thank our online audience for watching and participating. Thank you for your questions. If you want to watch more programs or support the Commonwealth Club's efforts in making both virtual and in-person programming possible, please visit commonwealthclub.org/events. Thank you. Thank you, State Senator Dahle. Stay safe, everyone.